The sound reached the doors before anything else did. 300 voices braided together into something that almost resembled warmth. Crystal touching crystal, laughter rolling in wave from table to table, the low percussion of cutlery against fine plates. The Galactic Summit Banquet was the loudest room in the known sector. 40 species, 14 languages overlapping. Every delegation performing diplomacy through the medium of food and noise and the careful performance of alliance. Empress Velith of the Mithrany walked through the entrance at precisely 7 in the evening, as she had done at every summit for 4 years. She signed the attendance roster, the large ceremonial ledger kept at the entrance, where each delegate placed their name beside their species and rank upon arrival. Her signature was elegant, practiced. She had written it 61 times in this book, across 4 years of summits, and 61 times the line beside her name had remained blank. 12 empty seats registered to her delegation. 12, because the Accord collapse had left the Mithrany without allies, without neighbors willing to share a table, without anyone curious enough to ask why she always arrived alone. She moved through the hall without looking at anyone directly. Her indigo curls, heavy and deep-colored as a night sea, fell across her shoulders as she took her seat at the far table. The bread there was already cold. It always arrived warm and left the same way it had come. She didn't reach for it. Sapphire eyes, wide and melancholic in the way of her species, settled somewhere past the room, past the laughter and the toasts and the warm chaos of 300 beings who had somewhere to be and someone to be with. Beneath the cuffs of her deep indigo gown, the bruise patches had already begun. They bloomed at her wrists first, as they always did, dark blue marks spreading slowly across lavender skin, involuntary, indelible until hours passed and her body decided it had processed enough. The Mithrany could not prevent them. Political isolation had never been entered into their biological dictionary as a category of distress, and yet her body produced the response faithfully, summit after summit, as if determined to name the thing her composure refused to. She kept her sleeves pulled down. The patches spread anyway, tracing their slow map upward toward her elbows while the room ate and laughed and produced warmth she did not receive. The roster at the entrance had her name, one line, 61 summits, 4 years, and she waited for nothing in particular, which was exactly what always came. Jonah Birch had worked 3 summits before this one, which in the estimation of the banquet hall's senior staff made him experienced enough to clear plates without dropping them and invisible enough that no one needed to explain the politics. He was 36, stocky, with dishwater blonde hair cropped close to his head and hands perpetually reddened from hot water. He carried a tray the way some men carry a briefcase, as though it had always been there, as though removing it would leave the arms strangely purposeless. His apron was stained at the hem. The kitchen staff called him Birch. The delegates called him nothing at all. He moved through the room in the rhythm of his work. Collect, clear, refill, dissipate. The Mithrany table was always the easiest stop on his route. Cold plates, full bread, nothing to carry back but the weight of what hadn't been touched. The head chef had told him, at the second summit, ceremonial, mate, don't worry about it. He'd worried about it. Every shift, the same calculation, 300 delegates eating, talking, being served. One Empress sitting perfectly still while the food went cold around her. He'd clocked it, the way you clock something you're not supposed to notice. The bruise patches at her wrists when her sleeves rode up reaching for the water glass she also didn't drink from. The slight shift of her jaw when applause broke out at another table for an alliance she was not party to. A kitchen porter had no business noticing that the seat beside the Empress had been empty for 4 years, but he noticed. He filed the observation next to all the other things he had no business knowing. Which delegates skipped the appetizers when stressed, which species flushed in the presence of carbon dioxide heating vents, which table laughed loudest when they were performing rather than feeling it. Birch was invisible. Invisible men had the advantage of accurate observation. On the 4th summit, at the end of his shift, while the kitchen wound down and the last delegates filtered out toward their transport suites, he made tea. 2 cups, one for himself, the way he always did after a long service. 1 extra, because the kettle was already hot and the thought arrived before he decided to have it. He carried the tray through the emptying hall, past the long tables being cleared by the night crew. past the guard stationed at the Mithrany delegation perimeter, who watched him with a particular quality of attention that meant we see you but you are beneath our interest level. Past the 12 empty chairs. He set the second cup down in front of her. Not beside an empty chair. In front of her, where she was sitting, where she would have to reach for it. Then he sat down in the chair to her left, one seat over, and drank his own. He did not look at her. He did not say anything. The banquet hall was mostly empty now, the sound thinning to something less curated, the scrape of chair legs on stone floors, a distant argument in the kitchen about who had miscounted the dessert plates. The noise that was left was honest noise, not performed. Jonah drank his tea and looked at the far wall. Her fingers hadn't moved in 11 seconds. The cup sat between them on the long empty table, steam curling upward in a slow, patient line. Somewhere behind them, a door closed. The banquet hall held very still in the space between his chair and hers, as though the room itself had paused to see what she would do. The roster at the entrance had 2 names on it now. Neither of them knew that yet. If you've ever sat in a room full of people and still felt like the only person in it, stay with us. This one's for you. She didn't pick up the cup. Not immediately. Not the way a person reaches for something they want. Quickly, before it disappears. She looked at it the way she might look at a document written in a language she recognized but hadn't spoken in years. Processing. Pausing. Checking the text for errors before committing to the translation. The bruise patches at her wrists had stopped spreading. She didn't notice that either. Not at first. But they had. Somewhere between the moment he set the cup down and the moment he sat without speaking, the slow dark bloom at her wrist had simply ceased. Not faded. They didn't fade that quickly. Just stopped their advance, the way a tide pauses before it turns. Her body had registered something her politics had no framework for. The presence of another person who had not yet required anything from her. 300 delegates had eaten in this room tonight. Not one of them had set anything in front of her. A kitchen porter had. Without ceremony. Without explanation. Without waiting to see if she would thank him. She studied his profile in the thin quiet of the emptied hall. Stocky. Short. The kind of man who would be unremarkable in a crowd and somehow still the person you'd remember. His hands, resting on the table beside his cup, were reddened at the knuckles, rough in the way that came from work rather than weather. He was looking at the far wall with the patient expression of someone who had finished a long shift and had nowhere pressing to be. He stood to leave, paused, looked at her cup, still full, still sending its thin ribbon of steam into the air between them. The tea's still warm. He walked away. She sat with that for a long time after he was gone. Not the sentence, which was simple enough, but the texture of it. Full words delivered without weight, without expectation, without the careful diplomatic calibration she received from every other voice in every other room. He hadn't said you should drink it, or I made it for you, or I noticed you never eat. He had simply reported the temperature, as though she might want the information, as though she was capable of deciding what to do with it herself. The bruise patches faded completely before she reached her transport suite. Not after the standard 3 hours. In 40 minutes. The Mithrany Medical Archives had no entry for that particular timeline. She found out about the roster the next morning, reviewing the summit's attendance records as part of her delegation's standard protocol. Her name, as always, at the top of the Mithrany entry. And below it, in the plain administrative script of a kitchen staff login, Jonah Birch, kitchen porter. The first second name on her line in 4 years. She read it 3 times. The chair he pulled up had been diplomatic furniture. He did not have clearance to sit in it. The 5th summit came 6 weeks later. She arrived at 7. Signed the roster. Moved through the noise to her table at the far end of the hall. A cup of tea was already there. Still warm. He was on shift. She didn't look for him directly. She didn't need to. She simply sat and waited. And at the end of service he came over with his own cup and took the chair to her left, 1 seat over, the same distance as before, and they both looked at the far wall while 300 delegates performed their warmth at other tables. Week 2, he arrived before her. The cup was there when she walked in. Week 3, she ordered the chair beside her to remain in place permanently between summits. The banquet staff noted the request without comment. The kitchen crew noticed he made 2 cups every shift now. Nobody said anything. This was, apparently, a thing that happened. By the 7th summit, the bruise patches no longer appeared on the evenings he came over. By the 9th, she had learned the sound of his tray being set down from across the room. The following summit, the attendance roster at the entrance had 2 names pre-printed at the top of the Mithrany line. Hayes, in the old ink of 4 years of tradition. His below it, added by someone in administration without being asked. The letters slightly bolder, the ink newer. Jonah Birch, kitchen porter. She arrived early that evening. Stood at the entrance for a moment before signing. Ran one finger along the length of his name. Not pressing, just tracing the shape of it, the way you touch something to confirm it's real. Then she sat down. The bruise patches didn't come that night. The tea was already warm. There are rooms that hold 300 people and still feel completely empty. And then someone sits down. Just sits. Doesn't explain. Doesn't ask. Just stays. If this story found something in you, come back tomorrow. We have another one waiting.